Welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show, where trusted leaders bring biblical insights to important issues to help you stand for truth and effect godly change in our nation and in our world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show. I'm Richard Harris, your host, and very glad that you are able to join us today. I've got a great guest lined up for us today. Kelly Shackleford, who's the president and CEO of First Liberty Institute, is going to be joining us in just a little bit. Before we get to Kelly and some other information I want to share with you, I wanted to let you know that the Truth and Liberty Annual Awards Banquet is coming up. This is going to be our third annual banquet on May the 2nd at 6 o'clock at the campus of Charis Bible College. Beautiful location and setting here in the Rocky Mountains. It's our #1 fundraiser of the year for Truth and Liberty, so we encourage everybody to get tickets, bring your family, bring your friends, and even consider sponsoring this event. You can find out all the information on our website at truthandliberty.net. We're going to be recognizing Abby Johnson. Her life was the focus of the movie Unplanned, which came out a couple of years ago or so. She used to be a clinic director for Planned Parenthood until she saw an actual abortion take place on ultrasound, and it changed her life forever. Also, Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long, who stood up for the rights of our military men and women who are being forced to receive an untested, unproven, dangerous so-called vaccine. And she put her career on the line and stood the test, and we're going to recognize her that evening as well. And then also Seth Gruber, who's the founder of the White Rose Resistance and the creator of the documentary film and book, The 1916 Project, is going to be our keynote speaker. We're going to have live entertainment, a wonderful, elegant meal. It is a night you will not want to miss. So check it out on our website at truthandliberty.net. Also wanted to mention today our free product giveaway, which is this booklet by Andrew Womack called A Message to Teenagers from an Old Man. I love that title. Andrew just distills in here some incredibly practical and powerful advice for young people gleaned from his lifetime of serving the Lord and his 50 years in ministry. Get this today by going to our website at truthandlibertygtn.com. That's a different site than what I mentioned earlier. This one is called truthandlibertygtn.com, and you can get your free product today. Listen, federal courts are in the news again, this time for blocking Donald Trump's agenda as president. In the last few weeks, we've seen Donald Trump sign a record number of executive orders implementing at lightning speed his agenda with incredible effectiveness, I might add. But, you know, the left is not just going to sit down and take this. They are fighting back, and they're doing it in the court system, as you can imagine. They've gotten federal judges to, for example, block Trump's deportation order for Tren de Aragua and other violent gang members who are illegal immigrants, allegedly. They've gotten a federal court to reinstate canceled grants in the USAID department. You know, some of these boondoggles that have been going out to foreign countries and other people all over the place, billions of dollars. They've gotten a federal judge to block the ban instituted by Donald Trump and his Secretary of Defense of transgender personnel serving in active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces. They've gotten a judge to stop the layoff of federal government employees, even probationary employees. This raises a lot of important legal questions, but generally speaking, number one, what is the job of courts in our country? What is the job of the federal courts in particular? Well, courts are supposed to determine on the facts of a case whether an action by a private citizen or by the government itself is illegal. And, you know, the Constitution says that the president is the executive. He has all executive power. But the president is not the legislative power. He doesn't have the power to make the law. He only has the power to execute or carry out the law. So where do we draw the line between making law and executing law? The president says, I'm going to shut down the Department of Education, but Congress has said we're going to create a Department of Education and we're going to fund it with this much money. So what latitude does the president have in saying, well, that's fine, but we're not going to spend this money on A, B, C, D anymore? You know, at what point does he cross the line invading the legislative branch? Well, the judiciary exists in part to decide those questions. What about in the case of deportation? You know, typically, when someone is an illegal immigrant into the United States and the federal government wants to deport them, normally they have to bring that person before an immigration court, not a regular U.S. court, but an immigration court, to decide whether or not the person is here legally or illegally. I suppose the person may have certain appeal rights into the regular U.S. courts. This is not my area of expertise, but generally speaking, they are allowed to appear before someone to determine whether they should be deported from the United States. All people within the United States, whether they're here legally or illegally, have a certain basic minimum of constitutional rights, including illegal aliens who have a right to minimal due process. So illegal aliens, until it's established that they are illegally here, have basic due process rights. Now, Donald Trump is attempting to deport dangerous illegal immigrants, so-called. I'm not saying they're not. I'm saying it hasn't been determined by a court of law yet. So I have to say it's alleged, right? He's trying to do this under what's called the Alien Enemies Act. This is one of the oldest laws in the United States. It was enacted under the administration of John Adams when the United States was afraid that we were about to go to war with France. And Congress enacted a law called Alien Enemies Act. Adams signed it, which gave the U.S. federal government the power to deport foreign aliens in our country who were, if the United States was invaded by a foreign nation or government. Well, Trump is saying, yes, we have been invaded, and therefore I have the power to deport illegal aliens without a hearing, okay? This same law was used in World War II and World War I. It was used in World War II famously by Franklin Roosevelt to set up internment camps for Japanese and German residents of the United States. And so Trump is trying to use the same law. Critics are saying, wait a second, there's been no invasion by a foreign government. We've got illegal aliens, but that's not what the Alien Enemies Act is talking about when it says an invasion. This is a proper question for the courts to decide. So we've got a federal judge appointed by Barack Obama who said, hold everything, issued a nationwide injunction. We've got to get to the bottom of this, and we're going to need to hear oral argument, legal reasoning, and factual evidence, and this sort of stuff. And so members of Congress now and others are saying, impeach that judge. Ron DeSantis is saying, take away federal power to review immigration issues, which Congress does have the power to do that. So there's an argument taking place in the public square right now. I believe that eventually this is going to be worked out, and it will be worked out according to the rule of law. Eventually, I believe Donald Trump will have his way and be able to deport these illegal aliens. It might take longer than Donald Trump wants. It might take longer than the American people want. But based on the wisdom of our founding fathers and our Constitution, I believe that ultimately the due process rights of people in this country will be respected, and the rule of law will be respected, and we will restore safety to our streets. Mass layoffs is another one where Donald Trump, and with the help of Doge and others, is saying, hold on, we're not going to, if you're a probationary employee of the United States, we're laying you off, or he's putting people on furloughs and things along these lines. There are laws on the books called civil service laws that say that you can only fire a federal employee who's not probationary. You can only fire them for cause. They have to have committed misconduct or violated some rule or something along those lines. So the question in some of these mass layoffs is whether Donald Trump is complying with civil service laws. Probationary employees, the president has more discretion and can lay them off. But there's a bigger question, which is the president is the executive. Doesn't he have the power to fire employees if he wants to? Is he really bound by the civil service laws in the United States? Did Congress really have the power to tie his hands when it comes to hiring and firing federal workers and federal employees? This is a really important question, that if it goes up to the United States Supreme Court and they rule that the Congress had no power to pass civil service reform, that will fundamentally change the balance of power as it exists right now in Washington. Maybe it's a restoration of the proper constitutional power to the president, But it will have a massive impact on Washington, I promise you that. That will really shake things up. What about grants? The federal, this department that's suddenly come into the news, USAID, established in the 1960s to distribute federal aid primarily to foreign countries. Well, it's being used now by liberals to send money all over the place for everybody, for every reason, every pet, liberal project. Everything from, so-called condoms in the Gaza Strip to Sesame Street in Iraq to transgender programs in Guatemala and all kinds of other things. Does the president have the power to unilaterally cancel those grants? Well, one federal judge says no. Does he have the power to basically lay off a majority of the USAID employees? And how about the Department of Education is another one, right? So where Trump says, I'm going to close down the department. These are important questions that are going to have to be decided by the courts. And I think it's actually going to shake out for the best, as we're going to see more restoration of the design of the Constitution. We're going to see more accountability for federal government. We're going to see a reining in of the deep state bureaucracy that has been abusing its power, has been abusing federal taxpayers for decades in this country. And I think also we're going to see the discovery of more fraud than we could have even imagined. I believe that many of these federal programs have actually been gravy train money laundering schemes for Democrats, ways to get massive amounts of funding to favorite liberal causes. And who knows, but that a lot of that money ended up being circled back into political advocacy on behalf of Democratic candidates for public office. And so this is a really significant time in our country's history as Donald Trump is doing what no president before him has ever dared to do. And the courts may rein him in a little bit, but they're not going to rein him in completely. And we're going to see fundamental changes in the way our government operates. And I think on balance, for the most part, it is going to be good for our country. Many people are saying, well, Donald Trump is abusing his authority. He's being a tyrant. He's going beyond his constitutional power. I want to say that, I've looked at some of this stuff, not deeply, but I've looked at some of it. And I think in some cases, perhaps he has gone a little bit beyond his authority, like exporting people from the country without due process. Believe me, I don't want Trender or Agua people here. But they should be, if they're arrested by ICE, they need to be put in detention and provided with some level of due process to determine, are they an illegal alien, right? And then they can be deported. I think it is a stretch to say that we have been invaded by a foreign country. That actually has not happened. And unless the court wants to reinterpret that old statute, I think Trump is going to encounter a problem there. I could be wrong. But I think on balance, the point that I'm trying to make is these things will work their way out. And yeah, Trump might be a little bit beyond his authority, but you know what? Congress and the deep state have been so far beyond their authority for, 80 years in this country that it's about high time that somebody push back and reset the clock to a constitutional balance of power. And I am confident that ultimately that is going to happen. Courts are coming into view in this nation again, also as conservatives are seeking to reestablish the traditional role of faith in our public life, especially in schools. And I want to talk about this at some length today because this really is the most important issue. If America is going to be restored, if the founding principles of our nation are going to be restored in America, if we are going to get back, if we're going to make America great again, right, we need to figure out what made America great the first time. And I would submit to you that it's very clear, as a matter of historical proof, that America became great because of America's devotion to God and to His Word. Don't have time in today's program to illustrate all of that. But I want to tell you, the nation was built on God and the Bible. The Declaration of Independence itself, which is our birth certificate, our founding document. The Constitution, folks, is built on the Declaration, not the other way around. When I went to law school, it was as if the Declaration didn't even exist. It was like some pre-existent document that was just nice to talk about, but really didn't have anything to do with the Constitution. This is wrong. The Constitution is built on the Declaration. The Declaration contains the principles and the philosophy that the Constitution should be interpreted by. You cannot understand the Constitution of the United States properly unless you first understand the Declaration of Independence. And the Declaration of Independence says that all men are created equal. Stop the presses. Right there. We are created beings. We are not evolved beings. There is a God in heaven who made us. And if we don't agree on that fundamental principle, then we need to start over, because the nation is built on that belief, right? Our government, our way of life makes no sense unless we agree on that fundamental idea that God made us, because there's a lot of things that follow from that idea. Number one, we are accountable to that deity, to that God who made us. That there's a purpose for Him making us. And we need to know what that purpose is. And our laws and our institutions need to conform to that purpose and to His moral law. This concept is called natural law. It's also in the Declaration of Independence. When the Founding Fathers wrote that the purpose of government is to secure our rights, and that when government becomes destructive of those ends, it's the right of the people to alter or abolish that government and to assume among the nations of the earth that station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. They're appealing to a concept called natural law. Natural law means the law that is unseen, but that you can discern from nature itself and from the Holy Scriptures. This concept of natural law was ascribed to by all of our founding fathers and undergird all of American law for the first 120 years of our existence, until progressives invaded our law schools and began to change the way people think. And they started talking about something called positive law, not natural law. Well, we can't discern natural law even if it exists. Really, the law is what the judge says it is. And we can do whatever we want. We can make whatever laws we want. After all, we're evolving, just like nature is evolving. You see how Marx influenced our laws? Not Marx, excuse me, Darwin. Charles Darwin said that we're the product of happenstance evolution, materialistic evolution, without God's hand involved. It's all a matter of chance and random genetic mutations, well, evolving to higher forms of being. This then was picked up and put in the social context and said, our societies are evolving. We're becoming more advanced and more civilized. We don't need that old religious stuff anymore. The Bible and God, it's superstition. We rely on science, and we apply this to our laws as well. And you see now the Constitution, well, it's evolving too, you see. You see, it's just this document that's a living, breathing document. Our founders, after all, were so wise, you know. They were so wise that they intended it to be a living, breathing document that changed with the times. Well, there's a little bit that they leave out of that formula, which is this. Okay, who gets to decide when it's changing? Well, of course it's us, the judges, right? The guys over here in the black robes who sit in this big building that looks like a Greek temple, in Washington, we're the ones because we know best. Well, excuse me, Your Honor, doesn't the Constitution itself say when it can be changed? Doesn't it have an amendment process built into it? Well, yes, that's one of the means, but it's not the only means. Our founders were so wise. You see, they put this invisible thing in here called a living, breathing document that no one can really define or put their hands around. But just trust us judges, to tell you when the document's changing. Oh, and by the way, here's a little thing called abortion rights. Here's a little thing called gay marriage, right? So folks, what I'm trying to tell you today is we've got to get back to God. We've got to get back to God in our laws, and we've got to get back to God in our schools. And I think we're making amazing progress. The progress that has been made in our courts and our laws in America towards the restoration of original intent in our Constitution in the last 5 to 8 years has been amazing, breathtaking. If you look at the cases coming out of the United States Supreme Court since Donald Trump's first election, it is stuff that we've been hoping for, dreaming of, praying for generations in America, that most constitutionalists and patriots wondered if it was really ever possible to get back to. And I'm telling you today, we're not there yet, but we have made amazing strides. Take, for example, the question of school prayer. In the case of Kennedy versus Bremerton High School, Coach Joe Kennedy was a high school football coach at a high school in Washington, at the Bremerton High School there, the state of Washington. And he made a promise to God that he was going to go pray at the 50-yard line after every game to honor the Lord for what he had done in his life. And he prayed for the students, and he prayed for the school, and he prayed for the opposing teammates, and so on. After a little while, the students on the team, the student athletes, said, "Hey, Coach, can we come join you?" He said, "Sure, you can come join me if you want to. You don't have to, but yeah, if you want to." So some of the football players started joining him on the 50-yard line. After a while of his team joining him on the 50-yard line, then the students, athletes on the other teams began to join them on the 50-yard line after the game. Well, this was a little bit too much, right? It was too much for the progressives to handle. And the faculty members and liberal parents began to complain, "This is not right. This is a violation of church, separation of church and state." What, voluntary prayer is unconstitutional just because it happens to be on school grounds? You see, the spirit of Antichrist begins to flare up when he sees this. He doesn't like it. He wants to keep the gospel out. He don't want people experiencing God. So they told Coach Kennedy, "You can't do this anymore." Coach Kennedy said, "Excuse me? I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran. I laid my life on the line to defend constitutional freedom, and you're not going to tell me that I can't pray? I don't agree with your decision. I respect you as officials, but I'm going to sue." So he did. Kelly Shackleford at First Liberty Institute represented him, and he took his case all the way to the United States Supreme Court. It took many years to get there. It almost cost him his marriage because of the time and strain and everything that was involved in it, but ultimately he won. And the U.S. Supreme Court in Kennedy v. Bremerton said, "This old case of Lemon v. Kurtzman that required strict separation of church and state, that is no longer the law. That was wrongly decided. We need to look to how the First Amendment has been decided or applied historically by the people of this country. And if there's a long-standing practice that the people of this country have accepted and was around at the time of the founding, then plaintiff, you've got to prove that somehow this is a violation. And the burden of proof is on you, and we're not going to do that lightly." And they upheld a school employee voluntarily praying with students on school property after an event. Well, with Lemon gone, legal minds across the country are beginning to consider, okay, based on these principles, what else can we reinstitute? And there are initiatives underway right now to reinstitute voluntary student prayer in schools, chaplaincy programs for school districts to hire chaplains who can assist students and counsel students on school property and all these other kinds of things. The reposting of the 10 Commandments on school walls. Bible study programs. Now, right now, the ideas are limited to, looking at the Bible as a historical text in school, though. But also, one of the most exciting things is funding religious schools through a school choice system. And right now, coming up through the court system is a case out of Oklahoma where Oklahoma has a charter school program where even religious schools can apply to be charter schools. And the question is, can state funds go to pay for a religious charter school? School choice is breaking out all over America today, increasing the options of parents to send their kids to private Christian schools with tax dollars. What we're talking about here is not, it's not like they're forcing somebody else to pay for it. Parents are already paying through their own taxes, property taxes and sales taxes and other kinds of taxes for public education. They're saying, wait, I don't want my kid to go to your public school. I want him to go to a different school. Why can't I have tax dollars to do that? And the courts are saying, yes, you can. There's nothing unconstitutional about that. And the courts are also saying, schools, you can't discriminate against religious schools. If the program is open for everybody else, then it needs to be open for religious schools. This is not an establishment of religion. This is not the creation of a state church. It's called freedom, guys. It's called equality. And that's what the First Amendment is all about. You know, there's been such an amazing shift in First Amendment jurisprudence in the last many years, beginning with a case called Becerra. He was the Secretary, I think, of Health and Human Services, sued in California over the requirement there. The law in California was that an abortion clinic had to post on it and provide notice to every patient, oh, you can go, not an abortion clinic, excuse me, a pregnancy resource center, so a pro-life clinic, pregnancy resource center, had to tell people coming to the pregnancy resource center, oh, you can go down the block here and get your abortion at this Planned Parenthood clinic. Well, the Supreme Court of the United States said, yeah, that's compelled speech, and we don't do that in America. You can't force someone to convey a message they fundamentally disagree with. That clinic, or that pregnancy resource center exists for one purpose, which is to save human life and to help mothers successfully have the children that God has given them. And you can't tell them that they have to tell the mother where she can go to get that baby murdered, right? Trinity Lutheran was another one, where the state of Missouri had a program to pay for private school equipment like playground equipment and things like this. And the local school district or superintendent of schools said, well, that's fine, but we're not going to use that money to pay for equipment at religious schools like a Lutheran Christian school. Supreme Court of the United States says, I'm sorry, that's discrimination based on the content of someone's beliefs, and you can't do that. It's a neutral program. It needs to be applied neutrally. How about the case of Shurtleff v. City of Boston, where my good friend Matt Staver brought this case because a Christian camp wanted to have the Christian flag flown on a flagpole outside of City Hall in Boston. Here's the thing, guys. That flagpole was available for everybody to fly a flag of their choosing, to promote their group, to promote a message, whatever. And they let anybody do it. But when it came time for someone to say, oh, wait, we want the Christian flag flown because we have a Christian camp, they said, no, the only group that can't do it are you Christians, right? And so the Supreme Court said, wait a second, in a 9-0, even the liberals saw the unconstitutionality of that position. In a 9-0 case, the court said, nope, you can't discriminate against religion. It's a public forum. Religion has its place. You've got the case of American Legion versus American Humanist Association. This is another powerful case. This one involved a cross, a gigantic cross that was in a cemetery at Bladensburg, Maryland. And this cross had been there since World War I. It was a private cemetery, and the parents there, the family members, the widows of people who were killed or whatever, wounded, I guess it was really for those who were killed since it's a cemetery, in World War I wanted to erect a memorial to those who had paid the ultimate price. And they raised funds, private funds, to have this cross erected on cemetery property. Well, years later, the local government acquired that cemetery and it became a government cemetery. Well, in 2015 or something along those lines, maybe 2012, along come Americans United for Separation of Church and State, the ACLU, and other atheist groups, and said, tear the cross down. You can't have a cross on federal government property, especially one that big. I'm ad-libbing a little here, but they wanted the cross torn down. The local, I think, city council said, yeah, it's got to come down. We can't do this. It's a violation of separation of church and state. Ultimately makes its way all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. This was the beginning of the end of the Lemon Doctrine, where the court said, I don't think so. This is not reasonable. The First Amendment, which says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, was never intended to ban such traditional expressions of religious faith. We have crosses in government cemeteries all over America and all over Europe, and Japan, including Arlington Cemetery right here. We're not going to ban religious expression on government property if it has been historically practiced and traditionally accepted by the American people. And here there's no doubt that this is the case. And so they upheld it, and they began the erosion that led, legally speaking, erosion of the Lemon Doctrine. I've already mentioned the Kennedy case. And how about the Brooklyn Diocese case? This was during COVID. The Brooklyn Diocese and also a Jewish group out of New York City filed a lawsuit to challenge Governor Cuomo's COVID lockdown. You guys remember COVID? You remember what the governors were doing? Where they're saying, okay, we're only going to allow what we deem to be essential services to operate during the pandemic. So what's essential? Well, basically whatever we say. So what gets on the essential list? Well, you know, hospitals got there, maybe some of them, but also so did abortion clinics and marijuana dispensaries and tattoo parlors, box stores, casinos made the essential list. But here's what didn't make the essential list. Churches, houses of worship, mom and pop stores, local restaurants, right? This thing was corrupt from start to finish. And you saw progressive governors across America lock down churches and synagogues and other houses of worship. Well, so this lawsuit, at the same time this was going on in New York, here in Colorado, Andrew Womack was challenging Governor Polis, another wild progressive, challenging his lockdown here because he was telling us that Andrew Womack Ministries you can't meet and churches all over Colorado can't meet. On Pentecost Sunday in 2020, Andrew Womack said, well, I think we've had enough of this. We've been locked down for 2 to 3 weeks, and that's about all we're going to do. We're going to open up and allow our worship again at our facilities. In the summer, eventually, the Colorado Attorney General got wind of it and issued a cease and desist order, and we were off to the races. We sued the government, they sued us, and we were in a long legal fight. The case of Brooklyn Diocese made it all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, as did a case out of California, and the Supreme Court said, this is not American. We're not going to do this in the United States of America. The Constitution says that Congress shall make no law restricting the free exercise of religion. And this law absolutely restricts free exercise of religion, and it's done in a prejudicial, discriminatory way, and there is not a justification provided for it. It's unconstitutional. So what we're seeing here is a proper balance. The nation is working out a proper balance between church and state again. You know, our founders did not want an established church at the national level. Even though the states of the 13 colonies who became states after the Revolution, they had established churches, many of them. Our founders said, that's fine for states, you could do that, but we don't want one at a national level because of all the harm that comes from a state-sponsored church, like the Church of England, or like the Catholic Church in France, or the Catholic Church in Spain. But history shows clearly our founding fathers never envisioned a radical secularization of our society. So how do we draw the line? What is the right balance? Well, here's the thing, guys. Our common faith in the God of the Bible has been a part of public life in America since the beginning and before the beginning. During the founding generation, over 1,400 times our governments, both state, local, and at the federal level, issued proclamations calling the nation to prayer, even praying to Jesus Christ for the remission of our sins. Clearly biblical principles in these prayers. And there is so much proof of the Christian foundations and the public expressions of faith. Like, how about just the swearing in on the Bible of oaths in court, or when we install the President of the United States? We recognize the Word of God as the foundation, and so many other things. Chaplains in our military, chaplains in our legislative branches, public prayer at public events, and so many other things, and especially in education. Public education in America was started by Christians to teach children to read so they could read the Bible. Public education was thoroughly Christian. Along came the secular humanists and pushed for public education without religion. And in that time, the church slowly backed away and relinquished its influence in education. And folks, this was one of the worst things that ever happened to our country. because now we have generations of Americans who have no concept of natural law, no concept of God or his role in our founding, no concept of what the principles of equality and liberty are actually all about, because they come from God in the Bible. Thomas Jefferson said, how can the liberties of a nation be secure if they forget that their liberties are a gift of God? Well, that's exactly what's happened in our culture because of the progressives. So I want to say this, that freedom of speech is another subject that we're going to see. We are already seeing pushback on to a restoration of our constitutional freedoms. So there is a lot of work left to do in our courts, a lot of work. We need to get Obergefell overturned, Harris Funeral Homes overturned. We need to find that government cooperation with private entities that censors speech is unconstitutional, and many other things. But I believe we're going to get there. And so I'm really excited to have as my guest today, again, I mentioned the president and CEO of First Liberty Institute, Kelly Shackleford. He's been the president of that organization since 1997. It's the largest legal firm in the nation devoted exclusively to protecting religious freedom for all Americans. They've won more than 90% of their cases. Kelly is a constitutional scholar who's argued before the United States Supreme Court several times, testified before the United States House and Senate, and has won a number of landmark First Amendment and religious liberty cases. He's one of the 25 greatest Texas lawyers in the past quarter century, as recognized by Texas Lawyer Publication, and he's the recipient of the prestigious William Bentley Award for Life and Religious Freedom Defense for pioneering work protecting religious freedom. So don't go away. We're going to share some information with you here, and we'll be right back after that. I'm going to sit down with Kelly Shackleford with an interview that you won't want to miss.
I want to let you know that we are having a Truth and Liberty Awards banquet on May the 2nd, and I'd like to invite you to be a part of it. This is a fundraiser. We are charging. We give out a great meal, and we're going to have Seth Gruber to be our keynote speaker. We're going to honor Abby Johnson, the one who the movie Unplanned was made about, and also Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long, and it's just going to be a great, great time. If you can't come, we would encourage you to give and to support it. Remember, it's the 2nd of May, our Truth and Liberty Awards banquet, and I'd encourage you to be a part of it. You'll be blessed.
Well, here we are. Welcome back to the Truth and Liberty Show, and my guest today is Kelly Shackleford, the president and CEO of First Liberty Institute. Always an honor to have you on the show today. Kelly, thanks for joining us.
Happy to do it, Richard.
Hey, once again, federal courts are in the news, brother, as we see federal judges all over the place blocking Donald Trump's agenda, in a sense, at least his executive orders. They're reversing his, immigration orders, or at least injunctions on that, his attempts to lay off federal workers. I think I saw one judge blocking a DEI program or banning of transgender in the military, and on we go. Just generally, as we get started this morning, what's your take on all this? Is Trump going to be able to carry out what he intends to do?
I think so overall. The Constitution's pretty clear that all authority on the executive branch is vested in the president. If you look at Article 2 of the Constitution, no other person is mentioned. Yeah. So the president has that power. I really think, there's a lot of issues in what you just brought up. I mean, there's been civil service reforms that have kind of made it to where you can't really fire government employees. Well, that seems like a restriction on the president, who's the executive, being able to control his own executive branch, right? And you've got situations like agencies that have been given power where they're not totally responsive to the executive, although they're executive agencies. There's a famous case called Humphrey's Executor that's been in place that many conservatives has felt is wrong. And so I could go through a lot of these issues, but I'll just say this. I really think that what the left is doing here might really be mistaken from their own standpoint, because I think they're teeing up a lot of big constitutional issues that right now the law looks like it's kind of on their side. But I don't know if these issues get up to the Supreme Court, if they will remain that way. So all they can do ultimately when they're through this litigation is lose ground and somewhat increase the power of the executive. So I think it's going to be fascinating to watch what happens. Of course, I think one of the big problems that everybody knows, I think the court knows, the Supreme Court knows, has got to be dealt with, is this idea of nationwide injunctions, allowing some judge in one jurisdiction to essentially enjoin the President of the United States all over the country. We're also going to see, though, situations with the power of the President is very peak when it comes to foreign policy, commander-in-chief, and they're challenging some of those things. I think they're going to find that these judges don't have power there under the Constitution. So I think a lot of these things it's kind of a great history lesson or a great constitutional lesson. And I would just say to people, although we do need to take care of this nationwide injunction issue, otherwise, I think it's great, have this go through the system. Let's lay out clearly what our Constitution is, the power the President has, the power the judiciary has, the power the legislature has. These are separate branches of government, and they each have power in their own realm. And I think that's going to be worked out eventually all the way to the Supreme Court. I think some of the chaos that we're seeing has been caused because the Supreme Court would not take some of these issues quickly. They denied that in a very close vote. You had Chief Justice Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett going with the liberals on the court to say, no, we're not going to take it yet. And I think they've allowed this kind of to flare out. But I think it's going to eventually get there, and a lot of what's going on below is going to be moved aside, I think, pretty sure.
Well, and just diving in a little deeper on this whole separation of powers issue. So the president has full executive power, but what happens, like, for example, with the Administrative Procedures Act? So it says, okay, agencies, you have to follow this procedure. You have to give notice and you have to publish and all these other requirements. But let's say the president comes in and says, well, they're my agencies and I don't like that, so I'm not going to do it. To what extent does Congress have the power to tie his hands?
Well, and that's what I'm saying. That's going to be those are the kind of issues that are going to be worked out. I think in particular, take the whole idea of civil service laws, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think most Americans think it's crazy that the president can't hire and fire his own people, and well, can the Congress, tie his hands when really this is a Article II power of the president? And so that's why you see a number of these people who were let go, who were fired, and they bring lawsuits. The unions are bringing lawsuits, the federal employee unions. But it's teeing up this issue. And so you're going to see this all play out through the Court of Appeals and ultimately at the Supreme Court. And what I'm saying strategically, as a lawyer who thinks strategically about our litigation, I think this is not necessarily a very wise move by what the left is doing and what they're trying to accomplish, because really most of these things, they're kind of teeing up things where they could lose ground that they had gained through maybe 40 years, civil service laws and all these things. So I don't think ultimately the law can move any more their direction. I think it's either going to stay the way it is in some of these, whether it's agency power or the power of the executive or all these different things, or I think more likely than not, you're going to see it move towards what the Constitution says. Because we actually have right now, for the first time in 80 years, a majority of justices who think their job is to find the original meaning of the text. They're originalist.
Wow.
And so they're going to go to Article 2 and they're going to say, wait, and they're going to have to deal with these issues. And I think you're going to see some changes because they're going to take us back to the Constitution. It's just taking a while because you start out with these district court decisions. Of course, you had an appellate argument yesterday at the D.C. Circuit. So you're already starting to see how quickly these things are moving up the chain, and I think the Supreme Court will begin to deal with these.
Well, not to get too legal wonky here, but, was it last year or year before when the Chevron doctrine got overturned? Is that, most people won't know what that is, so maybe you could explain that real quick. Is that an example of this court being more constitutionally oriented and less, frankly, deferential to the deep state?
Yes, absolutely. What Chevron deference essentially said is bureaucrats who aren't elected, if they created a regulation or something that could dramatically affect your business, your freedom, your all kinds of issues, if there was ambiguity about it, the courts had set this doctrine in place that we will defer to the bureaucrats.
Mm-hmm.
So it gave the bureaucrats
Experts.
all this power, whether it's, the EPA, which is the most common, or it could be that there's some water running through your land and they have now control over that. I mean, there's all kinds of situations, but it gave all that power to these unelected people. And what happened at the Supreme Court is that, of course, that's not in the Constitution anywhere. And they said, why should we defer to bureaucrats? We're judges. We can interpret what the statute says,
right,
what the regulation says. That's what we're trained to do. And so that took away dramatic amounts of power from the bureaucracy and put it back really in the hands of the public, your business, your individuals, et cetera. So, but that's what happens when you go away from things. I mean, take even Roe v. Wade. Read the Constitution all you want. There's nothing in there about abortion. So that's what the court did with a decision where they overturned Roe v. Wade. It's like, this is not in the Constitution. It's up to the states. And so that same approach is going to be happening with any lawsuit, including what is the power of the executive under the Constitution? What are the powers of judges to enjoin the executive? And certainly in the area of foreign policy and commander-in-chief, they don't have any power, to do some of the things we're seeing done. But I think I love the fact that we have a court that's going to look to the Constitution, that's going to look to the statutes, that's going to actually read the words instead of the living, breathing Constitution that they read into it what they want.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. I mean, you said something earlier that we, for the first time in how long decades, we have actual originalist majority on the Supreme Court. I mean, this is something that you and many others have been striving for your entire career, Kelly. How significant is that fact alone?
Well, it's huge. I mean, as you know, First Liberty, all we do is religious freedom, right? And I've been doing this for 36 years. And 8 years ago, when the judges started to be put on the courts that were more originalist, and we have a vetting division at First Liberty where we try to provide all the best data so that the best judges can be picked, the ones who will follow the Constitution, who are originalists. Because as people who fight for religious liberty, that's going to affect religious freedom. You go back to the founders and what they said and what's in the Constitution, and you're going to have full protection of religious freedom. And what we didn't know is how quickly things would begin to change. It was about between 4 and 5 years later, the Supreme Court takes about 7,000, sometimes 8,000 requests that they get. Out of those 8,000 last year, for instance, they took 58 cases. 58 out of 7,000. Mm-hmm. So if the idea is, hey, we'd like them to take one of our big religious liberty cases, that's a pretty big lift, right? I mean, mm-hmm. God's really got to intervene and give you that opportunity. Well, they didn't take one, they didn't take two, they didn't take three. We won 4 cases at the Supreme Court on religious liberty within 13 months. 3 of them were huge landmark cases that really restored religious freedom and took away precedents. One of them we knocked out a 50-year precedent called Lemon. Mm-hmm. The other, we knocked out a 47-year precedent called TWA versus Hardison that really changed religious freedom in a positive way. Now, I think we're just at the beginning of this, because as we get more cases, they're going to go back to what the Constitution says. So this is huge, and it makes a big difference. But, I mean, I remember reading some of these cases in law school and thinking, that's not what it says. And I thought, I'll never overturn that in my lifetime, but we can chip away at it. God was way ahead of me, as usual. And, yeah. I mean, we're knocking out things I didn't think we would in our lifetime. And it's amazing. This is a move of God when it comes to what's happening with religious freedom.
Well, how exciting is that? What about, talk about God in schools for a second. This has been, I mean, it really is sort of a linchpin for cultural change, isn't it? I mean, we've got 90% of the school children in this nation are in public schools where they're being taught that they evolved from a primordial soup of some kind. Kelly, there is no truth. You can change your gender. There's no accountability when it comes to sexual activity. All this kind of stuff that's contrary to God's word. Do you see on the near horizon real progress in our ability to restore our education system back to its godly foundations?
I do, Richard. I think one of the biggest areas for that you're seeing would be school choice. And of course, one of those big cases I mentioned that we won a couple of years ago was Carson versus Macon, which says once you have a school choice program, you can never exclude the parents from choosing the Christian schools, because that's what they tried to do. So as school choice is beginning to break out all across the country, I mean, maybe a third of the states now, Texas is about to pass school choice. I mean, it's occurring everywhere. 85% of the private school choices are Christian schools or religious schools.
Wow.
So that's going to really change the education that these kids get. Now, I'll tell you their new strategy. After we won that case, which was out of Maine at the Supreme Court, they came back and said, oh, okay, so we can't ban all the religious schools, so we'll just ban the ones that have traditional beliefs. I mean, they literally
That's almost worse, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. They literally read from the doctrinal statement of our client who had just won the case in the legislature. And so if you believe things like that, marriage is between a man and a woman, you can't be a part of the school choice program. So this is always where we knew the battle would be. And Phyllis Schlafly used to say, oh, you can't let there be school choice, because if there is, the government will control the Christian schools, the religious schools. This is the battle over that. And we've got that case going up. And in fact, we just argued at the Federal Court of Appeals. And if we win, which I really feel like if we get to the Supreme Court, we will, this will solve that issue. That, look, the government can't come in and tell the Christian schools what their beliefs can be.
Right.
I mean, that's discrimination. We've got lots of cases that say once there's a government program and they're providing benefits, they can't say, well, you can't do that in a religious way, or you can't have those religious beliefs. So this is the real battle. But if we win that battle and school choice occurs, then, religious schools, Christian schools, for instance, can have whatever their doctrine teaches as their school. The parents get to make that decision where they put their kids. But we don't want the government watering down any faith of any church school, anywhere across the country. So this would be a huge, huge shift in favor of getting kids in schools where they learn those values, where they learn biblical instruction, where they learn all that along with math and science and everything else that they're learning.
Well, I'm hearing that there's a pretty significant case coming out of Oklahoma right now. Not sure where it is on track to the Supreme Court, but it's the St. Isidore, I think.
Yes.
It's a Catholic charter school.
Yes.
And the question, I guess, in it is, can a state fund a expressly religious school if it qualifies as a charter school? And
we actually testified at their hearing on whether to do that and convinced them to do it. We just filed an amicus brief to support them in the case at the Supreme Court. It's about to be argued. And it's following that Carson versus Macon win that we had at the Supreme Court 2 years ago that says, look, once you create a program, you can't exclude the religious groups, even if there's government funding. Now, if the government gets in and starts to try to control, your religious, that's a problem. That's a free exercise problem. But this is saying you can't ban the group. So again, if there's a charter school, if there's a government providing funding for schools, I mean, the whole idea of our country was the free marketplace, right? Let's let there be different schools. Let's let there be different choices. Let's let the parents choose. And let's see which ones perform better. Now, you and I both know that ones that follow truth will probably have better results,
right?
And produce better citizens in all ways. But that case is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about, of the court moving us to let parents make the decisions, to not have the government discriminate against the religious schools. We have a very similar case like this right now out in California, where they're reimbursing people from all their charter and other schools for their teaching materials. But they're telling you, but we're not going to reimburse you if there's anything religious in your teaching materials. And we're like, we just won that case 2 years ago. You can't do that. And so this is the battle that we're seeing around the country. But what's I think is going to result from all this is that parents are going to have the ability to take really their tax money for their child and choose the best, and not be discriminated against and saying, well, you can choose the best but not the Christian school. That's unconstitutional, and I think the St. Isidore case will tell us a lot more about where the court is on that for sure.
Well, we don't have a lot of time left, but if the court says, yeah, a state can fund an expressly religious charter school, then what's the difference between that and saying, well, a state school can have prayer or the Ten Commandments or Bible reading voluntary?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point the whole point of religious freedom is no coercion by the government.
Right.
We don't want the government coercing anyone to be pro-religious, anti-religious, particular denomination. Treat everybody the same. Let there be freedom. That's what it's about. Now, Richard, I would mention to people, if they want to follow, there's, like you said, we're short on time. There's a gazillion cases going on that are really big right now. Mm-hmm. If people want to follow that, they can go to, you just spell it out, firstliberty.org, yep, and go down the page, and there's a deal that says Be an Insider. And we'll send you out an email every Friday with the 5 or 6 largest, biggest sort of religious freedom matters going on that week, so you can be in the loop, because we want people praying for these cases. We want people to be educated so that they'll realize we're winning, because we're winning over 90% of our cases.
Well, it's awesome.
And I think it emboldens people. And I want like your viewers to tell other people, so that they'll be emboldened and they won't be intimidated to go, I'm not sure if I can do that.
Absolutely. And Kelly, one of the great things about what you do is you provide your services to defend religious liberty. You provide your services to your clients for free at no charge. And there's no way to do that unless you've got people behind you, I imagine. So can people, if they want to support your work, can they donate on your website?
Yeah, absolutely. They can go to, again, firstliberty.org, and we're a 501c3 just like a church. I mean, we're nonprofit, so it's kind of fun. You can contribute, fight for religious liberty, fight against the bad guys, and get a tax deduction at the same time. So
hey, win-win-win all the way around. Hey, man, we're out of time for today, but wow, what a great conversation. I really appreciate it. It's been great having you on.
Great to be with you, Richard.
Folks, I just want to remind you as we close out today's program of our free gift for you today. It's called A Message for Teenagers from an Old Man. And as you know by now, that old man is Andrew Womack. So Andrew wrote this little booklet for teenagers to share some of the pearls of wisdom he's acquired over a lifetime of serving the Lord and over 50 years in ministry. This is yours for free. Just go to our website at truthandlibertygtn.com and you can pick yours up today. Also wanted to remind everybody about the Truth and Liberty Awards Banquet that's coming up on May the 2nd here in Colorado on our campus at Charis Bible College. It's going to be phenomenal. We're going to be recognizing Abby Johnson with the Samuel Adams Award and Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long for her stand as she stood up to support our soldiers against the mandatory vaccine in the military. And also going to have Seth Gruber as our keynote speaker. It's going to be a phenomenal night. You won't want to miss it. Go to our website at truthandliberty.net where you can get tickets and sponsor the event to help us do our important work here. And as we're closing out, I just want to give one more plug to First Liberty Institute, one of the finest legal firms in the nation, but they defend Christians and others on grounds of religious freedom, and they are literally changing the landscape. So go to their website at firstliberty.org and support them today and check out all of their amazing resources. So once again, thank you to everybody for watching Truth and Liberty today, and we'll see you again next time.